What's going on, everybody? This is Owen from Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast. Welcome in today to episode number 47 of the program. Today is April the 13th, Monday. We are joined today by a special guest, the owner of Skeleton Dust Records, located on East 5th Street in downtown Dayton, Ohio. Luke has taken the time to join us today. Luke, thank you for coming on the show and giving us some of your time today. How are you doing on this Monday?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Skeleton Dust Records, you guys opened in 2017. I believe you've been at a couple different locations. Just start us off. What can you tell us about Skeleton Dust Records?
Sure. Yeah, we first opened in 2017 at the first location, which was at 133 East 3rd Street, downtown Dayton, and then we relocated. I guess it's 20 like 3 years ago, basically 2.5 years ago. We relocated to the new location, which is 2101 East 5th Street, which is in the historic Huffman district, which is just a little bit east of downtown. And I moved there. My wife's store is across the street from mine. She has a store called Pink Moon Goods, and so I kind of moved over there to be across the street from her. Yeah, we opened in 2017. Yeah, I guess I've always wanted to open a store, or at least I had that thought in my mind. And I was at a point in my life where other career choices and paths weren't really working out the way I wanted them to, and so I just decided to go for it. And I had some experience working in another record store, managing another record store, and yeah, and here we are. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So in terms of like owning, you mentioned managing a store. What was the thought process like to take that leap to own a store versus just working at a store? Was that something you had envisioned for a long time, or was that something that you kind of decided later on in life?
yeah, I mean, it's definitely way later on. I remember first thinking it was when I was in college, which is 20 years ago now, basically, that I was thinking like, just kicking around the idea of opening a store. I grew up going to record stores, have always been a huge lover of physical media and record shops. So it was like one of my favorite places to go as a kid. I had the idea of doing it, but it's never seemed feasible. Like the thought of opening my own business didn't seem like possible at all. Uh, it seemed like, I don't know. It just seemed like something that was not possible at the time. Like I had no idea. I never took any business courses or anything like that. So like, why would I know how to do that? But yeah, I worked at Omega Music for a few years, and I think I left there and it was like 2015 maybe. And I was managing there for a couple years, and then I worked another job as an office manager at a advertising startup that was also in downtown Dayton. And I was the office manager there. And that's where, at that point, where I was really like, okay, I think I can run a business. I had some experience not only working at a record store, but managing a different business and just kind of handling the internal stuff. And it gave me the confidence to just go for it and trust that I would be able to pull it off. So, and then I opened the store in 2017.
Awesome. Just curious, where does the name Skeleton Dust come from? Is there origin behind that, or was that something just kind of drawn out of a hat?
There is origin, and it's also maybe a bit random too. I don't know where I got that combination of words from. I don't really remember. So, Skeleton Dust started off as a record label, which started in 2006. And so that's where it began. But I think I was just thinking about like kind of just like the futility of physical existence and kind of the absurdity of it too, like how we're here and then we're gone in an instant, more or less. And so it was kind of like an ode to that, I guess. Um,
Nice. And then owning a record store, working in a record store, do you yourself have any sort of musical background? Do you play in any bands? Do you play any instruments? What's sort of your relationship with music like?
well, yeah, I've always been a music lover. I've attempted to. I first started off playing like percussion when I was in middle school. Was in band at middle school and a little bit of high school, and then I would try to do garage bands with some friends that never really went anywhere. But when I was in high school, that's kind of when I became interested in records in general. Prior to that, I was collecting CDs and cassette tapes my entire life. But then records I got into in high school, and that was out of necessity, basically, because I started getting into DJing. And at the time, DJing was pretty much, you had to buy and play records if you wanted to DJ. I mean, CDJs were coming out around that time too, but so that's how I started collecting records. And so that was, into like trance and techno and drum and bass, like electronic music in general. So that was kind of like my first, a different foray into music was through DJing at that time. And then probably a few years later, when I got into college, is when I got into experimental music and noise music, and which is something I still do, and I still DJ as well. But like noise and experimental is like I would say the dominant part of my creative life and music creating life. I'm still very active in it. I have some projects myself and record and tour and host shows at the store and put out releases on Skeleton Dust.
That's awesome. That's cool that you can still, pursue those creative interests and also have a small business. And I'm sure that's a lot to juggle at times, but I'm sure it's also very rewarding at the same time. And are you from the Dayton area, or was there any decision to open a shop in Dayton, or was this just home to you?
Yeah. So I grew up in Indiana. Fairland, Indiana is where I'm from, but I went to college at Ball State in Muncie, Indiana. And so I graduated from there, and I didn't really know what to do, honestly, after I graduated. I didn't really have any great aspirations within my degree. And so I had friends that lived in Dayton that were I knew through noise and experimental music, and they needed a roommate, and that's how I ended up in Dayton, basically. So yeah, noise is what brought me to Dayton ultimately.
Awesome. The power of music, once again, you never know where it's going to take you. So, talking about record stores and owning a record store, this Saturday, April 18th, is Record Store Day. Do you have any events for that? What is sort of your store's stance or position on Record Store Day?
I get some of the releases, and we certainly put out lots of great other used stock that day. We have a pop-up vendor in the shop as well. It's called Watch It Again. It's actually my coworker Eric who purchased second time around's remaining stock after they had closed during COVID, and he purchased their remaining stock and started a business with his friend Jack called Watch It Again. And so he's going to be there popped up selling CDs and I think some DVDs. And then we'll have Roadrunner coffee set up in the shop as well that day. So I will, it's sort of it's not an official record store day celebration, but there are extra things happening for sure. So we'll have some of the releases and yeah.
Cool. Cool. Definitely, I know that's a big day for a lot of record collectors. Me personally, I'm going to be out of town for that. But in terms of buzz around a record store day, how does that work? Just for those who are curious in the audience, I know that you said, you get some of the releases and it's not an official celebration, but is there anything you can share maybe for the behind the scenes, how maybe, from your time perhaps managing at Omega, or how does that function? How does Record Store Day work, I guess, for people who are aware?
Well, I mean, you're solicited with the releases by distributors that carry those releases that come out that day. And then you put together an order for whatever you want to get. And then you are unsure of what you're ultimately going to get. Nobody ever knows. And because a lot of these releases are really heavily allocated. But so basically, you order whatever you want to try to get. And then you start receiving the stock and you have to become like an official RSD store, and that's mostly by signing the pledge as saying that you won't break these rules like flipping releases or selling things online too early and so on. So and that's pretty much it. And I curate Record Store Day a little bit differently than other stores. I'm pretty strict on what releases I decide to carry that day. I generally think my sort of mentality with it is carrying releases that I think are worthy of coming out that day. And I try to avoid buying releases that I think are not necessary or kind of come off as like a cash cow for labels. There are certainly good releases that come out that day. There's some great reissues that need to happen. I love getting those. But a lot of it is just a lot of things that don't really need to come out. And really at this point, I think the labels are really struggling to find things worthy of releasing. And so you have to sift through a lot of the stuff that's not really maybe a great buy ultimately.
Good to know. Good insight there. Definitely makes sense what you're saying. And I guess as a consumer, I can definitely think of some of those items that you see when those lists come out and when people are reading through them. Certain examples come to mind. Another event, outside of Record Store Day that is a little newer, a little more local, a little more niche, that is coming up is the Midwest Record Store Crawl. I was a part of that 2 years ago. I have an opportunity to go to that last year. My understanding is It's about 20 record stores or so in the Cincinnati, Dayton area, and there's about one day or two that patrons, go around and there's a giveaway of, I believe it's, a cash giveaway. Every store you go to is like an entry in the raffle. That's coming up again at the end of May, something I'm looking forward to. What sort of involvement does your store have in that? And how does that sort of highlight the community with the local record stores in the sort of area?
That's a great event. It's organized by Eric at Three Feathers, and that to me, the Midwest Record Store Crawl kind of encompasses the original idea of Record Store Day, where they created like a collective event involving different stores that were trying to, raise up businesses basically and raise awareness and get businesses at these places. And they do a great job of doing that. Especially in a local sense. Yeah, encouraging people to hit up multiple stores in one day, and different stores offer their own giveaways and specials on that day. But I think the main gist of it is the more each store you visit, and I don't believe you don't even have to spend money. You just have visit stores and you're entered into a drawing. So the more stores you visit, the more entries you get for a cash prize at the end, which is pretty significant too. It's like several $100s, I think.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have done the entire map too, visited all the stores, and which is really impressive. And so that's a really cool event. It's very grassroots, it's local, and that I'm definitely all about and love participating in that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sort of talking about to go along with that event. What sort of relationship do you have with other record stores when you were coming on the scene and have been open almost 10 years now? Was there any, stores that you kind of look to for advice? Or, I mean, some of these are small businesses. So have you formed any connections with other stores in the area that, have been meaningful to you in your time of owning a shop?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of the main one for me, I would say, would be Torn Light Records, which was formerly a Cincinnati store, but they're located in Chicago now. But I really looked up to them for inspiration and advice. For running a business, I worked a lot with them in various capacities before I opened my store, so they were like a huge inspiration for me for sure. And then after opening the store, just collaborating and working with, especially the other Dayton-based stores, I decided pretty early on that it was definitely more advantageous for me to work with these stores than as opposed to trying to be a competitor. Because like it's just Dayton, especially, is too small, and so working together just benefits everybody involved. So yeah, I do that whenever possible, but I guess kind of the main part of that happens would be like the Dayton Record Fair, and then getting those other local stores to sponsor the event.
Yeah, definitely. That's an excellent event that you brought up. It leads to another question in terms of, there's Record Store Day. We mentioned the Midwest Crawl, Record Store Crawl, and that's a big. Those are some events, but the Dayton Record Fair. Are there any other events that your store, maybe participates in with other stores, or that you specifically have that you want to highlight here?
Yeah. Well, it happened for the first time, but this past fall, Omega and Blind Rage Records. Blind Rage just closed recently, but Omega and Blind Rage organized the Oregon District Record Fair,
Yeah.
which was just a one-day event, and but it had a lot of the local stores and vendors, and that was great. Catacomb did a pop-up early on after they opened, but I'm trying to think of other like really regular events. I mean, really, it's just for me the Dayton Record Fair, since it's been happening once a year consistently for several years now.
Yeah.
But really, whenever we have the opportunity, things come up. There was the Yellow Springs Brewery has a record fair in the summer, and a lot of the local stores participate in that as well. So yeah, whenever the opportunity comes up, I'm down to collaborate with other stores for sure.
Awesome. Definitely, those are some great events. I've been to a few of those and can definitely say that they are a great time and a great opportunity for people to support local businesses. In terms of, we're talking about collaborating and, getting ideas or inspiration from other stores or people that you're looking up to in, the almost 10 years now that you've owned this store, what would you say has been the biggest challenge of owning your own store?
Biggest challenge, I don't, probably finding a work-life balance.
Okay.
The biggest challenge for me personally. Like, I never really had too many struggles with the actual, the business surviving. it's definitely had it's had been a slow growth, but it's been growing since I opened. And I'm very frugally minded, so I think that's helped me run the business. I'm conservative with the way I handle the business and money. So that has never really been too much of an issue. But like I realized a workaholic, and maybe that has benefited the business in a way, like it's ensured its survival. But specifically in the early days where I was working by myself, I didn't have any employees for the first 3 years, and I was working. The shop was open 6 days a week, 7 hours a day, or something like that. So it was just a lot. Working too much, and then COVID hit, and then the shop closed down for 6 months, and then that was like my hard reset after I reopened, and basically made the shop only open 5 days a week. I hired two part-time employees to help out with things, and also just to help the business grow too. So that would be probably the most challenging thing for me, is finding that balance between just not working and enjoying creative pursuits and pursue your personal life outside of the store.
Yeah, that's I can imagine small business, you want to pour everything into it, and sometimes finding that balance, it can kind of become a gray area of where's your life versus the business, which becomes your life at a certain point, I imagine. Talking specifically about what you have sort of in your selection there in your inventory, I know some stores are genre specific, some stores have a little bit of everything. Where do you guys sort of stand? I know your background with some of that, like noise music as you described it. I'm sure that comes into what you have available, but is there anything specific that people can expect, or do you have a little bit of everything?
Yeah, I would say that we're a general store. That's how I always describe Skeleton Dust. We lean, I think, harder into used product than new stuff. I do carry a lot of new records. Largely, in terms of that, I'm carrying reissues of classics that maybe are harder to find as a used copy. But yeah, it's sort of a general store. Definitely heavy on, the noise, experimental music. We have a large amount of that. I get big used collections of that stuff, and carry new releases that are coming out. So I think we're kind of a main spot for people that are in that to pick up that stuff. But otherwise, I mean, I like all kinds of music. So really, whatever comes in the door, and that can range from really basic classic rock to obscure experimental music. And I realized that just over time, organically, you sort of build up a network of people that are buying things from you, but then trading things in or selling parts of their collection, or you meet people and just kind of through networking, you that sort of organically dictates what ends up in the store.
Right.
So I think because we have a pretty wide and varied customer base that's into a variety of music, we end up with all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah, talk about music and, then again, a small business, that community that you build, and that helps, especially in a record store space, because they can build your inventory out. I'm just curious, in terms of like building for new records, how does that like, kind of, we mentioned it with like Record Store Day. Do you just tell the record label, or is there a distributor that's like, hey, I want X amount of this, and then they send it to you? And is it just that simple, or is there any kind of hidden weird process that people don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, more or less what you described is how it goes down. Either distributors that carry product, and then you order from those distributors. A lot of times you can have direct accounts with record labels if it's a smaller record label as well. So, but I mean, it's a pretty complicated web. Like if you're trying to keep up with new releases, there's new releases coming out every week, and tons of them coming out every week. And thankfully, I don't really get into that too much in terms of buying new releases, but you have to keep track of release dates, and then distributors require you to submit your pre-orders by this date before the release date, and there's a lot to keep track of, and sometimes things just won't get fulfilled either on orders, and things are going on back order all the time from distributors. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to manage with that stuff. There's a lot of time involved with ordering releases, and I stray away from it for that reason, because I would really need to have another employee doing all this work, like at least on a part-time basis, to actually keep up with it if I really wanted to do it. It's also very expensive too. We all know how expensive new records are now, and it's unfortunately getting worse. They're getting way more expensive. So a lot of times, when I'm got a cart going and I'm just like, oh man, this hurts. I know how it's a small amount of record, but so much money, and and versus especially used product where it's like the profit return's a lot better on used stuff than it is new things. I mean, typically, customers see these high prices that our records are being sold for by shops, but the shops are not marking them up very much. It's very nominal markup, um, to a point where it's like it almost seems pointless to even continue doing it. But I guess if you're selling a lot of this stuff, then the low profit margins kind of they get made up for by selling a lot of product.
Sure. That's interesting. I was curious about that as you were giving that answer, what sort of the margins on a record are, because as a consumer, I've definitely noticed the prices going up. And maybe when I go out to the stores, my bag is not as full as it was maybe a few years ago. Kind of talking about you know, inventory and starting the store. When you're starting out, how do you build an inventory? I mean, are you pulling from your personal collection? Are you like buying up a collection from a store? How do you have say, all right, I've got enough to open a store?
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I started, I just kind of cast a net out and was just hit up my friends that were collectors and asked them if they had anything they wanted to sell. I definitely got rid of a lot of my collection at that time just because I needed records, and unfortunately came about a couple other collections. At the time, I bought one off of Craigslist when Craigslist was more of a thing than it is now, and yeah, basically just like trying to find stuff from anywhere, and then taking about a good, like, couple years of building up a stock before I made the commitment of opening a physical space. Even at that time, I felt like, in hindsight, I barely had any stock in the store, um, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but, um, I definitely feel better about what I have now in terms of the amount I have. But sometimes it's nice to go into a shop and not have to wade through a ton of stuff and have like a smaller selection of things. It can make it easier to shop, I think, sometimes.
Sure. That's definitely a good point as well. Is there anything that as you look back, you're talking about the growth that your business has experienced, and that's awesome. And how, this has changed over this course of time. Is there anything that you look back on and say, I wish I knew that when I was starting out, or I wish I would have done that differently? You had some knowledge of the industry, so maybe there's not as many knowledge gaps heading in, but is there anything that you would have changed if you could go back in time?
Yeah. I'm not sure really. Maybe I think sometimes I would get kind of burnt when I buy collections. Like I just didn't have the knowledge that I do now and the confidence I have now with buying the collections from people, and maybe felt a little desperate to get stock at the time. And so I think every owner goes through that where they just maybe get burnt a couple times going into a situation and overpaying for something, or and really not, just generally speaking, not knowing very much about records and music when I opened the store. That's one thing I realized later on, like how little I actually knew about music. I thought I knew something, and I knew something, I guess, or I thought I knew a lot, but I knew something. So just, yeah, being around music and records over time, it would be nice to start off with all of that knowledge and to get going. The way things work.
Right. And then, looking back on your time owning a store and as you continue to grow and, you know, get more people to come in, switching gears from things you wish you would have done differently, what would you say, you're the most proud of or has been the most rewarding experience of owning your own store?
My vision for what I want my life to be like and how I want to make a living. I always struggled with finding a job, a career that I envisioned myself doing for a very long time. It was just seemed I couldn't really think of anything that I would be happy doing. So just taking that initiative and deciding to do something for myself and to make that happen, how I saw things being in my life going forward, and just going for it, that was huge. And I mean, I'm not. I live a very simple life. I'm not getting rich from doing this, but definitely the satisfaction of having my own business and running things the way I want to run them, it's completely worth it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure that's very fulfilling. Were you ever scared to have like, your own kind of business here? There's nothing really there's no net, there's no safety net, so to speak. Was there ever any like, what if this doesn't work out? Any doubt in the beginning?
It's terrifying. Sure, starting your own business and not knowing really ultimately, you can have all the confidence in the world that things are going to be okay and that it'll work out and that you have a great idea, but you really don't know until you start doing it. So I was definitely afraid, but also like I felt I was in a position where I felt like I had nothing to lose really. I really disliked the job that I had before opening the store, and I realized that like the stress living with that stress of a job that you really just didn't like was not worth it at all. And
Right.
so a change had to be made. So that was a big motivation for me to like not be so afraid and try and I
Yeah, and that idea, it clearly seems, has worked out. And I will say I've been to your store only once. I have bought a few things at the Dayton Record Fair, so those fairs and stuff are a great way to get your collection out there and get your name out there. And definitely will make an effort to get to your shop more. In terms of advice to people who are looking to collect, do you, as somebody with some insider knowledge of the industry, is there any advice that you would have, or is it really just have fun and pick out what you like?
yeah, enjoy yourself, really. I think people get caught up in the technicalities of records and collecting, kind of like approaching it more of to each their own, I guess. But like a lot of people get caught up in the archival aspect of record collecting and focusing on this record sounds better than this, or this pressing sounds better than this pressing, or whatever. Getting caught up in that kind of, I think, trivial parts of record collecting. And I say just like make sure that you're enjoying yourself as you're doing it, because if you're not, then like you should try to find a different hobby for sure.
Sure.
It's all about the music, like that's really what it goes back to. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, where do you stand on colored vinyl? Do you like colored vinyl? Do you think is it overpriced? Do they charge more for colored vinyl versus just a regular black one?
Yeah, at times they do. We'll charge more for color vinyl pressing, but I think that's maybe I don't know if that's really reflective of the production process, but more like oh, it's a limited amount or a limited variant of the pressing. Not to be a naysayer, but I'm not a big fan really.
Sure, sure.
I think it's complicated the market and it's kind of created like a artificial scarcity for things. It's definitely incited like a FOMO mentality with people. They feel like they have to get all the variants of a record, which is just to me nonsensical. Like, why are you buying 5 copies of the same record when you could be buying one record, one copy of it, and then buying 4 other albums from same band or different artist or whatever?
Sure.
So I don't really like that aspect of it. I think that's gotten kind of out of hand. And also, as a record store owner, it's harder to grade colored vinyl than it is black vinyl. So when I'm like inspecting it and grading it, and for pricing purposes, it's harder to grade colored stuff. And so I prefer black vinyl for sure.
Interesting. I didn't even think about the grading process, but that makes total sense. Just the colors harder to see any imperfections or dirt or whatever it may be. I'm talking about some of these changes in the record industry. We talked about how things have gotten more expensive and, records are not immune to that. Outside of price, are there any other changes that you have noticed, in your time of when you started collecting records back in high school through working in the industry to owning your own store?
I mean, certainly they're at the peak of their popularity and they continue to grow in popularity. It seems like they've been growing in popularity for I don't know what the actual timeline is, but easily the last, 10 years, they've been on the upswing, really. So that's great to see that there's like an interest in it from all demographics too. Our customers are all ages and, gender and so on. And so that's cool that people are I think we're seeing people just embrace physical media
Yes.
more and more all the time, which is an awesome thing. And I appreciate that. And I think, people are just tired of living in a world where everything is intangible and you have to rent everything. And I think we're just seeing people get over that more and more. And so certainly, yeah, records are still popular. But even if, one thing I'm seeing personally is an uptick of CD sales. Like,
I was just
people
about to ask.
yeah, people want physical media. They may not be able to afford records because they are getting to a point where they're getting pretty expensive. CDs are still very affordable, very accessible. So people are really into CDs now too, which is great.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely, pick up a CD every now and again. I primarily buy records. The one thing I have not ever, the one like I guess not the only medium. I've never listened to an 8-track. I don't really know what that is. Do you guys have 8 tracks? Can you explain what that is to me?
We have a handful of them, but I mean, it's basically a failed format,
Okay.
more or less. It's a precursor to the cassette tape.
Okay.
The design did not last. There's issues with it in terms of like how it doesn't sound very good from the get go, and then there's because it's an 8 track is a single loop of cassette of tape, of magnetic tape, and so there are breaks in the loop. So you'll have these breaks in the music like mid song. So just from that aspect, it's like not an ideal format, really.
Sure. Awesome. Well, in terms of, you know, maybe less about Skeleton Dust as a whole, but in terms of you, in terms of some of your interests, do you have like a favorite artist that you like to collect growing up or that you like to listen to now or that you're always excited to get in the store? Is there any artist or band that sticks out to you?
Sure. Well, Hawkwind. I'm a huge Hawkwind fan.
Shout out.
I got into them when I was working at Omega Music, and yeah, that's just like one of my favorite bands of all time. So, if you haven't checked them out, definitely check them out. Amazing British space rock, psychedelic, kind of proggy band. Um, Amazing band, and you don't really see their records a whole lot, so it's kind of a special thing whenever they.
Sure. I wrote that down. I was not familiar with Hawkwind, but I will definitely add them to my list. You mentioned, in your creative pursuits, touring and playing shows. I'm going to imagine that you're a fan of music. You've gone to concerts. You've seen different bands. Do you have a concert that you're either going to that you're really excited about, or do you have one that sticks out as, this was my favorite, or something that really sticks out in your concert going experience?
Oh man, I've seen so many shows over the years. But, I did see. I know we've chatted about Oasis, and I yeah saw them this past summer. That was an amazing experience. First time I had ever seen them. A band I had been into since I was a little kid. Definitely, you know, fulfilled my expectations of how great that was going to be. So that was a great one. Seeing there's an ambient musician named Harold Budd who's now passed away, but he used to work with Brian Eno and other artists, Cocteau Twins, and I got to see him. I think this is around 2018 or 19 in Toledo at their art museum there, and that sticks in my mind as the best ambient concert I've ever seen. It was just perfectly executed music, and I felt special that I got to see him before he passed away too. So it's definitely one that sticks out.
Definitely. This definitely, you talk about an artist passing away, you never know sometimes when the last show is going to be. I'm imagining, even with owning a store, you still have a personal collection of um, records or CDs, any sort of physical media. Do you have any piece that is like your crown jewel that you'll never sell, or maybe it's something that you did sell and you think I really liked that, but at a certain time you just have to get rid of it, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, um, it's tough. I am a collector, certainly. I'm not like too crazy about it. I feel like most other store owners are probably have bigger collections than I do. But yeah, I have like, I don't know, several hundred records, cassette tapes, and CDs. But I don't know. I have a lot of stuff. Let me see if I can find something that sticks out. Hold on a second. Let me grab it.
Right.
I'm not prepared for this question. Luckily, I'm at my office and I keep some of my records up here because I run out of space in the downstairs area. So
Gotcha.
I keep my noise and experimental records up here. But this is probably like one of my favorite things that I own. Let's see if so this is the cover.
Okay.
It's an artist named MSBR, and the record's called Ultimate Ambience. And so this is a Japanese artist, and he's also passed away now, but he would do art editions of his records. And so this is a like limited art edition where he did handmade artwork with this like foil wraparound collage sort of thing. There's like these like glue and wires right there.
Yeah.
So just like a one of a kind release that I acquired maybe about 8 years ago or something like that. So that's definitely one of my favorite things because he's like a really big artist to me, and it was one of those situations where it's like this is my one chance to own this properly. So I went for it, and it's a really special thing to me.
Awesome. Awesome. In terms of, your personal collection and building that out, you mentioned a lot of your store's inventory comes from used and people, trading or bringing things in. Is there ever a case where it's coming, they're trading it into the store, but then you keep it for yourself? Does that happen often or?
Not very often. I have a general rule with that is that I don't do that
Okay.
because I don't want to take all the good stuff home for myself, and that helps me keep my collection in control a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do make exceptions for things that are very hard to find or that I really want. I will keep them, but largely I don't. And
Yeah. And awesome. In terms of artists or specific records, are there some that just seem to, the second you get them in, they fly off the shelves? Or what is really kind of high in demand? Obviously, I'm sure some of the obvious stuff comes to mind, but is there anything that's maybe surprised you that's super in demand right now from collectors?
yeah, I'm trying to think here, like what's really hot right now. I don't know. Really, it seems like for the longest time it's been classic rock. Like people love classic rock. Steely Dan,
Yeah.
Supertramp. There's the obvious ones like Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, and Beatles, and all that. But like, yeah, those specifically, like, still legendary artists and bands, but Supertramp, Steely Dan, that kind of stuff that usually flies off the shelves.
Nice. And then for me personally, I'm very proud of my record collection. I've been collecting my story. Honestly, you're telling how you started getting into record collection, and it sounds kind of similar to my experience, where even down to the point of I was playing percussion in middle school, and that's kind of was where I was getting into music. And I have my creative pursuits. I play the guitar. I like to just kind of play covers in my apartment or whatever. And then in high school, I started collecting records, and my parents had CDs laying around, so I've always been kind of around physical media. One thing I'm looking to do in the next couple months as I start to kind of get some savings built up is kind of get a nice stereo system. How important is it, do you think, versus the system versus the record? Where does that balance lie? Can you have quality on low quality player, or what do you look for? Brand names? Any kind of recommendations for someone else who's looking to build a stereo?
I think it's important to have like at least a system that's decent enough to something that doesn't sound bad because a lot of people, yeah, unfortunately, like there's not probably a lot of guidance out there for what is you should get or worthy of getting, and so people start collecting, they don't know anything about record players, and they end up buying just a crappy record player, which are unfortunately too are widely available, especially new products. The suitcase style record players, Crosleys, Victrola. There's a lot of just really bad stuff out there. So my recommendation is that if you want a minimal setup, easy, simple, minimal setup would be like an Audio Technica LP60. That is like one of the best entry level turntables. The price went up on those, and so I think they went down again though, but they were getting expensive to a point where they weren't really worth it for a brand new price. But you can get them used really cheaply. Those are the best entry level turntable for the money, I would say, the Audio Technica LP60, in terms of a new turntable. And then just pairing those with a pair of powered speakers, like little bookshelf style speakers or monitors. And usually that will give you like a good enough sound, a decent enough sound, and then maybe you'll want to upgrade later on. But as a starter setup, that's great.
Awesome.
I definitely would say avoid suitcase style turntables. The speakers are not good in them. Quality is low. But really, I just encourage people to go with a setup, whatever works best for them, whatever they want. Some people have just different standards than other people. And I'd say at the very least that I would go for a setup like that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely kind of what I've been looking at personally. And for me, it's just kind of I have like a list in my notes app of different links pasted in. I've been searching around different vendors, different wherever, different eBay postings or whatever, just kind of keeping an eye on what's out there. And I'm excited to. I have one of those. It's like a Victrola, like one of those 8-in-1 kind of things, utilitarian. Maybe it was fine when I was first starting out, but I'm wanting to upgrade a little bit, and I am excited to kind of make those purchases and get all that stuff. So that is pretty much all that I had. I want to thank Luke for taking the time to sit down and chat with us, kind of just about the record store, record industry, his tastes, his musical background, his just sort of interests. I think it's really awesome to own a record store. That's something I've kind of thought about, but I'm not sure I'm ready to take that plunge anytime soon. But you did it, so it can be done. It is possible. So maybe someday I will find myself in your shoes. But any kind of final message, any parting words for the people here? Any shout outs, social media, anything like that before we sign off?
No, I don't think so too much. Yeah. We're on social media under Skeleton Dust Records. You can find us easily. We have a website where you can purchase essentially every item that we put out on the floor, you can buy on the website. We have it shipped worldwide, or you can select free local pickup. That's a nice option if people want to kind of just keep tabs on what we're putting out throughout the week all the time. We have a lot of customers that buy things and choose local pickup and come pick it up. So I definitely encourage people to check that out. Check out this Saturday the shop. I'm not sure if this episode's going to be up by then, but yeah, for record store, and yeah, we'll have Watch It Again there. Well, there's a DJ there playing as well. So yeah, it'll be a fun day. And thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was glad you said yes when I kind of reached out via email. I'm trying to kind of get more people on from the local area, and just people from bands or anybody who's in music or adjacent to music. I have more of these conversations rather than just me rambling about different albums that I listen to, which I like to do, but I think it's more engaging for the listener to hear another voice on here from time to time. Thank you for taking the time. I know you did not have to do this, but I do appreciate you doing it. That is going to do it for episode number 47 of Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast. I want to thank Luke again from Skeleton Dust Records. You can check them out on social media, online. But that's going to do it for us here for episode 47. Yeah. Thank you. And as always, never stop rocking.
Thanks, Owen.